The laughter was sharp, cutting through the sterile air of the command center like a blade. It wasn't the warm kind that lifts a room, but the mocking kind that coils around a person's dignity and squeezes. Every head was turned toward the slender woman in gray overalls, a mop bucket resting quietly against her leg. One of the younger SEAL, muscles bulging beneath his camouflage, smirked and said it loud enough for everyone to hear that maybe she should run the next drill since she was already in charge of cleaning up after them. The comment hung there, ugly and deliberate, the kind of jab designed to stick. Around him, others chuckled. She didn't respond. She simply set her jaw, her gaze steady on the table where miniature soldiers and choppers mapped a simulated battlefield. Janine Vale had been in rooms like this before, many times in fact, but never standing in overalls with a mop handle brushing her arm. The uniform she had once worn had been folded into a box years ago, its medals tucked away with it. She was older than most in the room by at least a decade, her hair pulled back in a simple knot, her hands rough from work that no one here thought twice about. What they didn't know, or maybe refused to see, was that her posture carried the same stillness she'd held under enemy fire, and her eyes scanned the strategy table with the precision of someone who had lived the kind of chaos these drills only pretended to recreate. Her story was not the one they assumed. Years earlier, Janine had worn the Trident insignia with quiet pride, one of the few women to pass the grueling qualification. She had been deployed to places no news camera ever reached, serving beside men who never questioned her resolve because they'd seen it in the dust and blood of real battle. She'd been there the night a mission went bad, so bad they stopped speaking about it entirely. 4 of her brothers in arms never came home. She had been the last to touch their hands before the medevac lifted off. The memory smelled of diesel fumes and iron, of sand so fine it clung to her lips, even as she whispered her promises to them. She left the Navy not because she was broken, but because she'd promised herself she'd carry their memory without distraction. Yet the civilian world had a way of erasing service the moment the uniform was gone. Bills had to be paid, and cleaning military facilities kept her close enough to the people she once served with, though they rarely recognized her as one of their own. Today the captain had been absent, an unexpected summons pulling him out just as the briefing was about to begin. The lieutenant, young and overeager to show control, had glanced around for a replacement leader and landed on her. His grin said it all. This was a joke he expected the room to enjoy. "Run the drill, Janitor. Show us what you've got." Janine didn't argue. She stepped forward, her boots clicking softly on the polished floor. She looked at the map table, then at the men surrounding it. Some were smirking openly, others avoiding her eyes. A few, to their credit, looked uneasy. She began with the calm precision of someone mentally unpacking a live operation. She pointed out the choke points they'd overlooked, the flanking routes invisible to those who only saw the bright lines and colored icons. At first, they listened with the casual disinterest reserved for a long meeting. Then she began moving the figurines, not at random, but in sequences that anticipated enemy movement 3-4 steps ahead. She spoke in clipped terms, each decision layered on the last until the holographic field shifted from a vague defense to a net so tight that even the simulated red team would struggle to breathe. The smirks faded. One of the senior petty officers leaned forward, following her placements. His brow furrowed as realization dawned. These weren't textbook moves. These were patterns lifted straight from real operations, maneuvers that didn't just exist on paper, but had been tested in deserts and city ruins. She called out a likely counterattack, then a secondary push, then described exactly how they'd cut the enemy's retreat by turning their own terrain against them. The room fell into silence. It was the kind of silence that comes when the balance of power quietly shifts, and no one quite knows how to address it. The lieutenant, who'd been leaning back in his chair at the start, was now on the edge of his seat, his eyes darting between the map and her face as if trying to piece together who she really was. Her final move was decisive. a coordinated assault that ended the simulation in under 7 minutes. The system flashed the result in bold red letters: total victory, 0 friendly casualties. The drill's AI opponent had been dismantled with surgical precision. She stepped back from the table, her expression unchanged, her voice quiet. She told them that victory wasn't about muscle, noise, or ego. It was about seeing what others missed and trusting the people beside you enough to move without hesitation. No one laughed. One of the younger men, the same who had chuckled loudest earlier, stared at her with an expression that teetered between embarrassment and respect. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. His posture had shifted, just slightly, the way a soldier stands when they realize they're in the presence of someone who's earned the ground they walk on. The petty officer finally broke the silence. He asked her where she'd learned that sequence. She met his gaze evenly and told him she'd learned it the night the enemy tried to box them in near Al-Madiyah. They didn't, because 4 good men refused to let it happen. She was the only one who walked away. The air in the room changed then. It was subtle but unmistakable. Shoulders straightened, eyes lowered, not in shame but in acknowledgement. The lieutenant swallowed hard, the flush creeping up his neck. He offered her the seat at the head of the table, but she shook her head and stepped back, returning the figurines to their starting positions. Her job was done, and she had no interest in taking their captain's place. Later, as the drill wrapped and the men filed out, one by one they approached her. Not with apologies, but with something better. The quiet nod of equals. A nod that meant they saw her now, really saw her. There was a line she'd once heard from an old commander, and it stayed with her all these years. It wasn't about shouting your worth or demanding respect. It was about standing so firmly in who you are that the world has no choice but to recalibrate around you. She had lived that truth here today without raising her voice once. When she left the room, mop bucket in hand, the corridor outside seemed brighter somehow. The laughter that had greeted her earlier had been replaced by a different sound. The soft shuffle of boots as men stood to the side to let her pass. She didn't smile, didn't need to. Respect once earned speaks louder than any words. And somewhere deep inside, in the quiet place she kept for the memories of the 4 men she had lost, she whispered that promise again. To honor them not with noise, but with action. The kind of action that leaves no doubt, not in a room full of soldiers, not anywhere. Some battles are won without a single shot fired. Some victories happen in silence, under the hum of fluorescent lights, with no medals and no headlines. But those who witness them never forget. That day, every man in that command center learned a truth they would carry forward into every mission, every decision, every test of their strength. That the measure of a warrior is never in the uniform they wear, but in the unshakable ground they stand on when the world doubts them most. And Janine Vale, the woman they had once called just a janitor, walked away, leaving behind not just a room of soldiers, but a room of witnesses. Witnesses to the fact that silent strength, when revealed, can change the course of a fight before it even begins.